Ivan Pavlenko, From Family to Family, Chapter 1, Part 5.1, School Years and Labor Steps, read by Natalia Buzova. I was rushing to school from the age of 6 when my sister Maria was being prepared for the first grade. She did not want or was afraid to go. Then I jumped off the coach and shouted, I will go instead of her. But my mother cooled all my impulse down. You are still small. And I almost cried because I already knew all the letters. We had to wait another 2 years. It was difficult for my sister to study. She used to memorize poems and could not memorize them. And I would listen for a while and I would recite to the whole house. Parents laughed and she cried. In the fall of 1931, it was finally my turn to go to school. My mother washed me, dressed me in new pants and a shirt, and my father gave me a penny for my notebooks. And I ran to the priest's house, where I was supposed to study in the first grade. There were 32 students in total. Fedor, Tkachenko, Madzenkos, Olga Solonucha Voronins, Petro Solonucha, and Ivan Karpenkos, Mikhailo Golub studied best, and I was always among the best. We were taught by Yerema Yuchimovich Teslenko. Yerema Yuchimovich was strict and demanding. A naughty or lazy person could be cracked with a ruler on the palm or forehead, and a diligent person could be praised and patted on the head. He played the violin and directed the school choir. I still remember some songs. The rooster went to war when a star was rising. Oh, where to, where? The hen was asking. I'm going, chicken, goodbye to the great war. Oh, where to, where? To fight with the turkey. Oh, turkey's kurkuls killed the rooster. Go, 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 the chickens cried. Or another poem and song. I am a little girl. I was going in the rye field. The wind mom untied my braids. I went out into the field. The pioneers are living. The flags are red. They carry them in their hands. I plucked a blue flower in the rye field. Oh, I love you, mother. In the second and third grades, we were taught by Paraska Yosipivna Berezhna, young, black-haired, and beautiful. And the main thing was that she was gentle. But we got worse and did not always listen to her. One day she came to our house. My father and mother started asking how I was studying and if I was not misbehaving. I was sitting on a bench as if on needles. And she came up to me, ran her fingers into my forelock, and said slowly, mischievous child. I got goosebumps. Well, I thought my father would beat me with a belt. And she, as if sensing my state, added, but he studies well. Then I took a little time off. I studied well and easily. In the second grade, on the October holiday, Fedor Tkachenko, Oля Solonucha, and I were awarded gifts for excellent academic success. The head of the collective farm himself presented them to us in front of all the people. He gave me some cloths for a shirt. My parents were so happy that at home they gave me a few pennies for sweets. And when mother asked father to teach me shoemaking little by little, he replied, let him learn to read and write. It's enough that I don't get out of this stinking leather. In the summer of 1933, our village was replenished with new children of school age. 13 children from families that had died of starvation were brought to us from Kharkiv. Among the homeless brought in, the smallest was 5-year-old Bishanova. As it turned out later, her real surname was Bessonova, which she mispronounced when she was 5 years old. Shura Maximina, my future wife. thin as a little stream. All of them, boys and girls, were shaved and wore the same clothes. They were settled in the Tereshkivska house in the groves where a collective farm patronage was opened. The Yashniki children who had become orphans were also placed there. Nilka Stetsenko and Mikhailo Humans, Vasil Stetsenko and Katerina Stryapchuks, Mikhailo Padalka, Хитрівський, Наталка Ткаченко, Яцунова, Kanivets Mikhailo Babich. Shura was the smallest, but no one had her. School director Alexander Gorovich Kokosha and head of the village council, Hanna Khvil, used to take her for a walk. In the fourth grade, Volodymyr Zinovich Petrenko taught us. The teacher was excessively strict, nervous, and hot-tempered. He was then 50 years old. For any violation of discipline, ignorance of the assigned lesson, he would beat students with their foreheads on the desk or on their heads with a pointer, grab them by the neck, and throw them out of the classroom. But he gave excellent students books to read from his own or school library. Then, for the first time, the wonderful world of literature opened up to me. I read Robinson Crusoe, Among the Savages of New Guinea, Uncle Tom's Cabin, which made a very strong impression on me. I read them mostly at night with a candle. My mother ordered me to put out the candle and go to bed, but I couldn't take my eyes off the book. There was no fifth grade in the village. I had to go to Lochvitsa, 6 kilometers away. All the Solonuchas, Olga, Petro, and Ivan, as well as Petro Matvienko, went to secondary school number 1, which was near Skovoroda Monument. Semen Makovetsky, Vasil Davidenko, Grabars, Dmitro Galivets, Halka Padalka, Gleyova, Oksenia Padalka Revas, and I went to the 7-year school number 2, located on Yakhniki Road. The rest of the class was limited to primary education. Some did not go to the 5th grade because they didn't study well. Others did not have shoes and clothes, and others simply didn't want to walk 6 kilometers every day. Learning became more interesting, but also more difficult. There was little time left for homework. We left the house while it was still dark and returned almost in the evening because autumn and winter days are short. My mother gave me a piece of bread and an apple for lunch, which could only be used to kill the worm so that it wouldn't suck in the stomach. We used to return home exhausted and hungry. It was especially difficult in winter when it was cold. On settled frosty or blizzard days, we stayed at home. Therefore, I was no longer an excellent student, but I got a 4 and a 5. We were taught by different teachers. Mathematics and physics by Alexander Yurkovich Pivy, botany and chemistry by Petro Gavrilovich Dibrova, Ukrainian language and literature by Valentina Mikhailivna Gladunova, Russian by Valentina Stepanivna Gorbunova. She was also our class teacher. History was first taught by a young teacher whose name has been forgotten because he was not with us for a long time. He was taken by a black crow as an enemy of the people. Party member Berta Yakivna, who also taught German, was sent instead. The director of the school was Petro Hrytsa. There was a small library at school, and I started reading everything in a row. I remember Captain Grant's Children, Mysterious Island, Lachtak, Sannikov's Land, Treasure Island, Captain Cook, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Seola, and some others. Of the academic subjects, I liked literature the most. I recited emotionally and started composing poems myself. My admiration was also transferred to Vasily Davydenko. It was then that pioneering newspapers branded the exposed enemies of the people. The class teachers also told us about them in educational lessons, and we believed that it was true. Overwhelmed by patriotic feelings, Vasily and I decided to write a poem on this topic and sent to the newspaper Yuni Leninets. It must be said that Vasil was a naturally witty guy, and he could have made a great humorist or satirist if he had followed this line. I wrote the poem Enemies. Here is the text. In the very heart of the motherland, despicable enemies climbed in to put a knife in our backs, but we will beat them to the bone. We will move on forward to bright shores, and let's build happiness as the wise Lenin commanded. Vasil and I sent our poems to Uni Leninists, and after some time we received answers. I don't remember what the editors wrote to Vasil, but they praised my poem and recommended reading Mayakovsky, learning from him figuratively and scathingly satirizing enemies. I immediately rushed to the library, took a volume of the recommended poem, but I did not like his poems at that time. Then I wrote many clumsy poems about Lenin and Stalin, about Pushkin, who had died at the duel from Dante's bullet, which really impressed me. I wrote about Taras Shevchenko, who had been exiled by the Tsar. At the same time, I composed satirical verses about girls and let them go around the class. We had a student, Motya Zaslanets, who was a bright student, fair-haired, pretty. I couldn't catch up with her in my studies, and in my heart, I envied her. And during the breaks, I tried to attract her attention with something, but nothing worked out. Then I tried to hook or pinch her. She didn't stay in that and gave back with witty and sometimes insulting words. She had rosy cheeks, and I wrote, passing around the class, 2 lines. Motya is a rose. Motya is a color. Cheeks like fried meatballs. And she gave that poetry to the teacher, and I was punished. Such cases were not unique. I also liked to draw. Botany and zoology teacher Petro Gavrilovich Dibrova often asked me to redraw flowers, birds, and reptiles from the textbook, and he always gave me a 5. At home, I liked to draw Chapayev on a horse, mustachioed Budoni, and for those pictures, I exchanged some things from my peers, a leather belt, a knife, a wallet, but paper was missing. Notebooks were almost not sold in the store then. They were issued to us in a very limited number by teachers. I had to draw on wrapping paper. Petro Matvienko drew beautifully, better than me. He and I sometimes exchanged pictures. After the 7th grade, he entered the Ceramic Technical School and then graduated from the Agricultural Institute and became an agronomist. Although I studied well, read a lot, was fond of poetry, liked to draw, I was still far from an ideal student. My friendship with Mitrofan Hetmanenko, with Hetman as he was nicknamed, had a particularly negative effect on me. He was 2 years older than me, but only 1 grade ahead. He studied indifferently, and not because he couldn't or didn't have the ability. He just didn't want to. Mitrofan and I lived on the same corner and were friends, or rather I was under his influence. After lessons, we usually did not go home right away, but wandered the city streets, looked into shops where he artistically teased the sellers. And I, as a spectator, laughed, supporting him. For example, Shklovsky, a Jew in his 50s, red-haired and with a handbag, was selling in the hardware store on the Stone Row. So we came in, and Mitrofan asked seriously, but so that everyone could hear, "Shklovsky, do you have horseshoes?" "Yes." "Any size," he answered. "Pick me a dozen for pigs." Offended, Shklovsky grabbed a broom, and Mitrofan, giggling hideously, turned his back to the exit. I was laughing at the door at the top of my lungs. What only Mitrofan did not produce at school. There was no rest for either the teachers or the students. Where he was, there was laughter. He was a nugget, an unsurpassed master of various inventions. True, They often ended tragically for someone. He annoyed almost everyone so much that one day, Yashniki boys from all classes decided to beat him on the way home from school. He was ambushed and beaten near Kryvyi Rih. And when they wanted to teach him again, he dropped out of school without finishing the 7th grade and went to Shepherds. Our friendship weakened somewhat. Now I ran to the pasture only at weekends. He did not visit us because my parents' attitude towards our friendship was negative. Vasil Davydenko and Dmitro Galivets had left school even earlier. They stayed at home for 1 year and then went to the 6th grade, which opened in Yashniki, in a newly built 7-year school. I stayed with Aksenia Revas and Halka Hleyova. I got better at studying. I graduated from Lochvitsa Middle School number 2 with excellent grades in almost all subjects, except for algebra and geometry. At the graduation party, the class teacher told my father that I should continue my studies in high school or enter a technical school.